How many proto gamers do you have for MAVUIKA? Leave her the comments. There is less than one left. Week for the 1st of January that MAVUIKA will come, and that I will be on stream with you.
Okay.
Testing the character and watching all your spins and even throwing me into your accounts. And today, so that you are very well prepared, let us see the free will. The equipment you can have, the weapons, and how it should be built with obsidian set and day. Parchment according to whether you play it from DPS, in field, or support. That many of us are on the ship of war, support. Although, as always, and as I told you, I have prepared a carry construction for, that you also see the potential that you can reach, apart from, of course, your best team, that we will talk about, of him in the video with Silonen, Thitlali, and Bennett. So, leave a good like, a good LTE, and if you should subscribe, leave a good comment for the algorithm. Thank you for enjoying and seeing the video. Thanks for all the love and support. Remember, it costs you nothing, it is totally free. Recommends and positions the video. We grow a lot, so thank you for all of it. And once a day, the Lunar Blessing draws are already active. I think leave me the comments. And if this video reaches 6,000 likes and 1,500 comments during Christmas week and New Year. Until after MAVUIKA, I will be drawing not 1 but 2 Lunar Blessings, which I will take advantage of. If you are eating, be very rich, and thank you so much for enjoying all the contents of the channel. Remember to use Lotva for MAVUIKA and Thitlali, and you will save yourself enough proto gamers and, above all, enough money to buy something nicer at Christmas and have the CEO hacks for MAVUIKA. And we're going with MAVUIKA's pre-build. Well, MAVUIKA differs from DPS and DPS. And DPS. Let's start with the DPS, basically because I think it's what most players do. We love the players of Genshin, Karis Impact. They like the Karis, and because it is the most simple and the only variant is practically whether or not you carry your weapon. And the teams will leave them for the end, so watch out until the end of the video. DPS MAVUIKA wears Obsidian set, as well as easy. 15% damage inflicted and 40 probability. Critical. Remember that you have these 40 critical probability, what will make you build at the most about 45, at the most exaggerating 50 probability, because it gives you others 40. The set and already going from 80 to 85 probability is too much.
I don't know.
Then she remembers, and this applies for the DPS and for the support, which she does not require recharge. She knows that it works with AO. The combat points we have explained in the video of the MAVUIKA kit. So recharge it. You have to look for artifacts that don't carry a recharge of energy, and this is very important since in the substats you are only going to look for critical proportion and attack percent. Mastery can make sense in this build as we melt 1 in 3 hits if we play with Thitlali, or we vaporize 1 in 3 hits and play with Furina. It may make sense, as long as it's not something that's causing you to lose attack, i.e. in priority ratio. Criticism until the capeo, now I explain it better, and the percentage attack. Mastery only as a 4th substat better than, for example, a flat life or a flat defense or percentage. But you don't have to. Actively looking for mastery because every attack substat percent knows it multiplies. The very multiplier of normal attacks bonuses to play the DPS, and then with the C2 you win a additional multiplier in proportion to your attack as Alekino, i.e. to more attack more. Damage from normal and charged attacks with which more total DPS damage and worth more investing. In attack above the mastery that you will melt 1 in 3 hits. In short. And finally, to close the subject of mastery, if you play Thitlali C2, that won't be everyone but Thitlali. C2 gives 250 mastery to the character in the field. Here you will use even less mastery because remember that mastery to mastery you have is giving you more damage in reaction, but the more mastery you add more damage but less and less total damage, i.e. that there is a limit. And that's why it's said that if you link her with about 300 master's degree at most, Utao the same thing, that you arrive about 300 or so, but you prioritize the critical proportion, and MAVUIKA is going to be something similar to what if you go with Thitlali C2 that won't be everyone. Mastery won't want it. Now, what does it carry in the substat, or how much is the capio that I always explain of proportion to? Well, in the substats, in the main stats, it's always going to be a watch. Attack, it's always going to be Chalice, Pyro, and will test because MAVUIKA for attack escalations. It has, especially if it is C2, and very careful with this, it is possible that maybe some Chalice of Thought. Attack. If you go with Shilonen, that gives you bonus elemental damage. It can come decent at Chalice of Attack, although it's not going to give you much attack. But we'll see it and test it, because mainly with C2 the Thought, you take much more advantage of the attack. It may lead to an attack Chalice, to Chero Chalice of Pyro. And then the helmet, if you don't carry his gun, maybe he can't escape critical ratio, so you'll wear a critical damage helmet to get to the 80-85 probability ratio Capio, and in the passive, then wears an attack helmet, whether it is Chero or C2, and has its weapon E. Including his weapon and good artifacts, he manages to escape the ratio. He would then wear helmet of attack, considering that it must escape the proportion with the helmet of attack that I have seen. A lot of people misunderstanding this and wearing an attack helmet because they don't understand this correctly. But then the ratio has 70 probability and 210 damage. No, the attack helmet is the best in slot, as long as including very good substat and the attack helmet itself, you get it. 80 probability, well, 40 plus 40 set, and 245, 250 critical damage. This is the construction of what should stay is at about 40-45 probability. Bad 40 set, 240, 250 damage. Critical 0% power recharge, and as I say, it's always going to be worth it. Attack percent. You need with MAVUIKA, it's attack to finish. Remember, it's going to test. This isn't yet safe, but capable with C2 has some combination where the attack Chalice. Perhaps it could be better than the Pyro damage bonus Chalice, as happens to Nuvilette with the Fae. Life in a concrete team and with many constellations, not for everyone, and the helmet can be a foul. Attack over critical damage in most cases where you have your weapon, and including Thea. Now we go with the construction of MAVUIKA sub DPS outside the field. As well, MAVUIKA support outside the field can have 2 sets, can have Parchment set that buffa the elemental damage of the damage team, or you may have Obsidian set. When are you going to go with Obsidian set? Character that is already played with Parchment. That is to say, if for example you play a Silonin next to a MAVUIKA sub DPS team, because you can perfectly carry it with Obsidian set to do that. DPS function out of the field doing the Asian Gleam with a set that gives you 15 years inflicted, 40 of probability, and if above on those teams does any reaction outside the field or all of the reactions. Here specifically comes a little better the mastery than plain carry. Because DPS in the field can melt or vaporize 1 and 3 hits, but outside the field can make reaction with all the blows, can melt all the blows, vaporize all the blows, as Xiangling does. Then what teams could these support be? Teams that most will play support, and then where there really are rare combinations, MAVUIKA. Support will mainly be played with Mualani and Kinnish, with Kinnish not yet. Is played with no one who goes with Parchment, with which MAVUIKA will use Parchment set, and now I'm talking about the Parchment set as well, and the substitute you have to carry with Mualani usually going to go with Shiloh and Parchment that you will also have already pre-punched and everything and you don't want. Field is going to do a lot of damage anyway. MAVUIKA can carry in this case the set of Obsidian to be a very powerful sub DPS, and you see very large numbers outside the field. Then in Monopyros will not be reactions, and if you are going to play Bennett Kazu, Harlequino, or MAVUIKA that much, people want to play this team with Harlequino plus MAVUIKA on the same team. Here MAVUIKA the set of Parchment is carried by no one with whom would Parchment, and then by the Raiden National, and much more. Less than Xiangling, there may be a new variant of Raiden, Fiorina, MAVUIKA, and late Bennett Kazu. Or Silonin if you played with Bennett Kazu, and no one carries Parchment, then MAVUIKA would go Parchment, because as a Super Vaporize does and makes a reaction on 2 elements, you can buff 3 elements with Parchment, and you can buff the Raiden Electro, Fiorina Hydro, and Pyro of itself to 40% elementary damage of the Parchment set. And on the other hand, if you carry Silonin, Instead of Bennett, Kazu, then Shilonen will carry Parchment and surely bring the buffo to the Electro of Raiden to make in the field a very large number, with which here MAVUIKA could go Obsidian. Zoid's a sub DPS that does a lot more damage off the field doing the super all the time, vaporized above the Electro-charged reaction of Raiden plus Fiorina. And from here, as you see, the pattern is easy to see if you already have a Parchment set. She can go Obsidian, but there is one last alternative that is important, and is that whoever wants to grow it can go Parchment, like sub DPS or support in most cases, and you can switch to Shilonen carrying Parchment. By Shilonen, Petra Archaica or Kilnen are from yesteryear that can be very interesting. Good. We'll leave this for another conversation because it's a lot of text, and who's older in the game? He understood, but who can't tell to see what set the Petra is? What that is, what you're telling me so, is a very old set that will give you lots of laziness to grow, but that can be combined well, and both buffos can also be combined in greater equipment damage, but as I say, it is a little more complex, and it's not MAVUIKA's build. That's when he wears the set now if you're going to wear Obsidian set. With MAVUIKA sub DPS, the stats and substats and the condition of the weapon are the same as the construction. Carries are extremely equal, so MAVUIKA's Obsidian set, now that you already know when it wouldn't just build like DPS. What's the good thing if you built a MAVUIKA DPS and you will play it in teams where you play with Obsidian? Basically, you've already armed a MAVUIKA for DPS and sub DPS for equipment where Parchment is not needed, and what equipment is needed Parchment as. Surely a Raiden national when you play Fiorina MAVUIKA, Raiden Bennett, a team of 4. Kinish. When you play Kinish Fiorina MAVUIKA Bennett. And I think the teams that hurt the most to get more will grow and evolve, and more will rise from position the best teams of the game are with MAVUIKA Parchment, because imagine to put a buffo to 3 elements of the team of 40% of 40% probability, and instead of 8 seconds, 20 seconds, which is crazy because, well, with Parchment they are. The difference is that instead of putting 40 probability to the own MAVUIKA, and 15 years inflicted, you will bring 40% of elemental Bonoano to itself, and to 1 or 2 characters or elements more of the team then. By not winning that probability, even if you carry your weapon, it's very complicated to weather the critical ratio. To bring him an attack helmet, as I was explaining earlier, and additional to this, Thiao C2, for the support, what it provides is that base attack, that you know is a bit controversial, that they were 300 and then it got NFized, but that base attack also serves its support form or sub DPS and apart. That 20% elimination of enemy defenses when your elemental throws it in support mode with which doesn't work as support for attack multipliers either with which. Even if it was C2, the Parchment build won't wear attack helmet because it's still wearing it still. It's going to be complicated to weather the critical ratio because you don't win 40 of the Obsidian set, because you're going with Parchment and it's not going to carry Kali's attack, or there wouldn't be a chance that the multipliers as sub DPS support do not go to the strokes of the elemental but to the strokes of the elemental. Normal attacks loaded, and others inside the field with what with Parchment would always go clock. Pyro's Kali attack and probability helmet without looking for power recharge, and substat full. Critical ratio up to capping the proportion considering what the weapon adds to you. If you have the weapon, if you don't, and a percentage attack, in some case the same mastery as if it vaporizes. Melt all the hits out of the field, good as his sub DPS with Parchment. Yes, but as you will. First focus on the ratio, and then focus on the attack on because being C2 is also going to give you 200 base attack and each percentage attack multiplier. You're going to multiply by the total base 700 of your weapon, 741 plus 200 of the C2 plus the highest base attack. The pure game that has a character that is MAVUIKA so very careful with the attack, because it is still core for her above mastery. And now last point, I commented that the DPS and sub DPS build where you don't have to carry Parchment is similar, but remember how I explained before that sub DPS with Obsidian, the helmet of attack, if you are going to need maybe in The same circumstance in which you weather the critical ratio but the chalice, as the sub-DPS is there. Your C2 attacks do not affect the chalice would not apply that of the attack chalice if you play a MAVUIKA sub-DPS with Obsidian then as global, although in some very concrete situation. And only with C2 can work with attack chalice carry Pyro's Kari by default too. That is versatile, and you can always play it both from DPS and sub-DPS as you want it as a sub-DPS of the teams that I have commented, and then you play the carry on another team, you rotate, you have fun. You have variability and versatility in your account, and you play what you want. This is these will now weapons because I have told you certain factors, whereas MAVUIKA's own weapon gives 11 probability base attack of the underworld and 35 critical damage, as the ratio may be excessive. What weapons do MAVUIKA good if you don't have his weapon? Well, the first one that's interesting. Comment is the Wolf's Tombstone. The typical permanent banner weapon that exists is day 1 here. Kinnich's gun doesn't hurt either, but it depends on. There's a burn core inside and your equipment is melted and so on. There will be no burn core but Kinnich's gun if you're going to play specifically a Kinnich team or a team of Mualani with Ajida or Emilie, so that Mualani vaporizes on a burn then. Kinnich's weapon if it comes less MAVUIKA but conditionally only from burns or dependence of one inside the team. The Tombstone, as I say, is very good for her, but it depends on you. You try so much harder on the critical proportions to weather them as you don't have a weapon. Give you much more proportion as your own weapon, and after 4 stars, we have a Tombstone. Little girl who is the weapon of Fontaine's Forge, that is a little tombstone literally. And that you don't have the wolf Pia. It's going to come very well, especially with refinements because it's just the same. Attack, 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 and should strive to weather critical proportion as minimum. And then if you want the support, we have the weapon of NATLAN's Forge that, as I explained to you in a video a lot ago, and I said a lot of things about MAVUIKA that then I was right to say. I said I was going to have cooldowns of 16, 18, and actually, what he has, and something else I said that if he's supportive of his entire source of major damage, he was going to be with his elementary ability as well as Nahida and Furina, and indeed, so is with Witch. As she supports a very good weapon for her is with refinements NATLAN's controllable as it gives her a lot of attack and a lot of damage to your elementary ability, which is your main source of damage if you go from support. If it goes from carry, as I say, as you only want attack, 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 and more with the C2 for that, especially because with the set of Obsidian you can facilitate to cap the proportion then. Free to play would recommend the weapon of Fontaine's Forge with refinements. And finally, Norific mention if anyone has this gun to the boss of let it give you life %, you don't. You want it, but then it gives you 608 base attack, that's fine. 33 probability, careful with carrying Obsidian, because it may spare you the probability. But if you go to support with Parchment this weapon, it would be very good because there is no more probability for the set of Obsidian, and apart the passive also gives 40% more attack, that comes very well. Then the C emblem of left read is pretty good for MAVUIKA, especially support with Parchment equipment. And now is when you come. I'll make a separate video because you'll ask me a lot, but the constellations I make, Philcone on the C2 Citrol, and that I make a video of what is worth constellations. Old weapon deserves MAVUIKA. Leave me the comments if you want a video like this, or also say Charlie, because MAVUIKA teams basically I'm going to recommend or explain 2 teams as DPS, and now you will understand the classification. And then as support, I have already told you about several. I will mention some more. 4 or 5 teams as support, as it is indeed a 5-star sea angling as carry has. 2 very marked teams. The only difference is if you play sub-target slot, that basically is. Take advantage of the mechanics of the combat points of your ulti to maximize the damage it does as DPS using NATLAN characters, and I think you already know who a team is because it's the soundiest of these. MAVUIKA, who is MAVUIKA, Citrol, and Gilonin and Bennett. This is going to be their best in slot with a lot of difference. At a 0C, you'll get the 200 combat points, you'll activate all the buffs perfectly, and you have 2 pyro to make sure that Chilonin always gets the crystallized to activate the set. of parchment, since MAVUIKA being Kati here takes obsidian to the pyro, and with citral and so much, yes, is C0 as if it is C2. If weapon already explains how strong it can become citral in C2. If weapon MAVUIKA melts 1 in 3 hits, with which not well built MAVUIKA, you will see a damage that you... But MAVUIKA may be with C0 or even with C2, because you'll see a melt out of every 3 mediums. Million of 600,000 and base blows, because you'll be seeing about 300, 350 a thing so. You will say this makes absolutely no sense, and if we talk, this is with some C2 if you weapon any cone a little bit of it. Come out a little Balaneo, and if we talk about full C0s, you'll see something similar to Arlecchino's cone or C2E. On this team, then all other MAVUIKA team variants are basically teams where you no longer take advantage of this core, but you can combine old cores like Carry Pyro. You can play MAVUIKA Furina Kazuha Bennett, which is the core of Arlecchino MAVUIKA herself generates. 80 combat points for the 100 you need to throw the ulti, and activate all the buffos and then with normal attacks that can be done in rotation, you generate the 20 leftovers. In fact, you generate like 28 according to the character, and so on. Then in the end, you will be able to activate the ulti, will be able to activate the buffos, and you're going to be able to play carry. Obviously, you don't get to the 200 combat points, with which you will do less harm, but in this team, that is a core of Arlecchino will approach dangerously. Arlecchino still practically without any NATLAN character, and from here on, it is very easy the combinations you could do, because if you already want to optimize this equipment with Furina, because you could play, for example, MAVUIKA the Furina itself. If you don't have Citalali instead of Katsuha Getzilonen, and you already earn more noctambulism points, and it becomes something very similar to the first team, but changing to Citali for Furina and last Bennett, and now again, yes. You have an extra NATLAN character, you won't get to 200 points, but you'll get to about 140, and Zam, if you already have Shilonen who is healer, you want to switch to Bennett, and you put a Kazuha and Furina Kazuha Shilonen MAVUIKA. Because you would have something also solid, and are all sub-variants of the original team that is the best in slot, that is that of Citalai, Gilon, and Bennett with lock onto Pyro. MAVUIKA, and now the sub-DPS teams, well as mentioned Norifika MAVUIKA, will also be able to playing with Novelet in a kind of strange vaporized, you know that Novelet today plays in the Hydro Monkey, playing Novelet Furina Shilon and Kasuha. But for example here, instead of 4 DPS, and since there is a lot of hydro application of Furina and Nuvilet MAVUIKA, will vaporize outside the field with Obsidian set, because Shilonen is the one who will carry parchment, and good that I will tell you. The best, you will be surprised, because you will see 200-300,000 of each vaporized blow of MAVUIKA outside the field is a honorific mention, because technically the team will get more harmed with Kazuha. Vaporized here would go Obsidian set, because as I say, if it carries parchment, then there are monopyros of Arlecchino that are also being commented that they will not be the best in the world. But they are. Zub variants of Arlecchino and Arlecchino teams remain in their best team as third best game team below MAVUIKA and Novelet, and Arlecchino can also. To play with MAVUIKA here, MAVUIKA can go perfectly Obsidian if you play Arlecchino. Katsuha MAVUIKA Bennett with MAVUIKA playing Siangling and Monopyro. Or if instead of Bennett or in time from Furina you put Shilonen, as you can play Shilonen Parchment and Obsidian MAVUIKA and play Arlecchino, carry with MAVUIKA sub DPS Shilonen Bennett or Shilonen Kazuha. I don't know how you feel to combine it, because since you have Gyla that is Shilonen Bennett, you don't need to carry double Gyla. Then teams where it really does its function well done, and not this, which is just fan service that people are going to want to play it by playing it all over the place that does it very well anyway, and niche. Mualani and Raiden are the 3 teams that will grow the most and explode with MAVUIKA with Kinnick. Indisputably, it will always go with Parchment, as the best in slot will be Kinnick, Furina, MAVUIKA, Bennett, and then there will be a core of cracking, more than ripening, much cleaner than there is now, and Kinnick benefits infinitely more from MAVUIKA than it benefits from any other pyro of the game. Kinnick is going to get better, as already very strong, and will improve a madness in my opinion, along with Mualani. They're going to get fair, and I told you that the top 3 are going to be MAVUIKA, Nubileta, Arlecchino, top 4, and on 5 are going to be Kinnick and Mualani perfectly. And the next team of MAVUIKA support sub DPS is with Mualani, where again here you go with Shilonen Parchment, with which MAVUIKA Podre Obsidiana or carry MAVUIKA Parchment and Shilonen are Ancient Archaic Petra, and Mualani will vaporize all the hits perfectly. So another team that improves a lot, and then the celebrities. Raiden National here, I'm afraid here I don't know what can happen here is what explained to you. Before that, it is possible that even a new team will be enabled with Furina New You. Raiden National with Furina that there was never because Furina doesn't apply enough if you play with Xianglin. And you can play a Raiden Furina MAVUIKA and last good Bennett for the Pyro Consonants and the Ye. Brutal attack of Shilonen to give more charges to MAVUIKA. Let us remember that of sub-DPS the charges, only a single damage, a single number, a single scale of the ulti that can affect a cut. It's really fun to see MAVUIKA do more damage than Raiden do in everything he does, but on that team he does. You go Shilonen Parchment, you will take MAVUIKA with Obsidian, and if you go with Bennett, you will take MAVUIKA with Parchment, and how it will do as I explained before is super vaporized on the electro charged. That is to say, an overload and a vaporized one will put the bonus not only to the pyro, and not only to the electro but also to the hydro to 3 elements with which Furina and Raiden will have 40% elemental damage. More thanks to MAVUIKA on that careful team, and then there are more honorary mentions of no. Being two Cryos dos Pyros like MAVUIKA as previously played with Shilon Melted, Inverses and stuff like that, but mainly this is going to be the top 4 or 5 support teams. The one plus the other variant's best DPS equipment, and this video as you see is the pre-build. Complete MAVUIKA with this video is encyclopedia, share it to the person you see who have more Ganitus to know what will happen to MAVUIKA, or how it is built if someone ask on some sort network how MAVUIKA is going to send him this video and can review it to Millimeter to know what's going to happen to Lark on you Pyro. You have all the important and all the set data information so far so that we know and speculate until disclaimer comes out as. Always careful that the character has not come out and it may then not be so typical disclaimer. But you have to because it's true you can change after beta, this is all that you have to know today to build MAVUIKA a little more to leave a good like a good. Subscribe, leave a good comment for the algorithm, thanks for enjoying and for the video. You do it for all the love and support, be very careful to have a very good day. There is no mini there that you have reached the end, leave in the comments Motomami for the algorithm to see who has reached the end and how many I read you saying Motomami for algorithm there is no mini and Chaito.